Okay, so we have the first one. We have the first thought. The first thought comes from the research agent. We can see that he used the search and contents tool, and what he thought in order to get here was to find the latest and most relevant news about the USA stock market. I should start with a broad search query using the search and queries tool. And the query that he searched for was search news, latest news on the USA stock market. Now it is the turn of our chief editor, and our chief editor also used the search and contents tool, and his thought was to accomplish this task, I will need to carefully review. Good morning everyone, how's it going today? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to this new video. In today's video I am going to be showing you how to create a graphical user interface for your CrewAI automation. I am assuming that you already have your CrewAI automation working, and so we are just going to be building the front end in this time, okay? As you saw at the beginning of the video, the front end works like this. You have a sidebar with just a short description, then some inputs of your automation. In this case, it is going to generate a newsletter from a given topic. So one of my input is the topic, and then just a personal message. When you click on generate, you will be able to see all your agents thinking in real time on this part of your application, okay? So you're going to be able to see who is thinking what tools they're using, who they're asking questions to, etc. Okay? And then of course, by the end of the automation, you will have a download button that will allow you to download whatever your agents produced. We're going to be using Streamlit to create this front end, which is a Python framework that allows you to build front-end applications with a few lines of code. Now this video is actually a clip from another video that is probably coming up in a couple of days or next week. And in that video, I show you how to build everything from the automation to the actual front end, okay? If you're interested in watching the full video, you can click the link in the description. And if it is not up yet, you can of course subscribe, click the bell icon, and you will get a notification once I upload it. Now, something else that I wanted to mention is that in this particular video, I am using the folder structure that CrewAI recommends and that they generate with their CLI. But in case you're using just the core components, you'll be able to do that just importing the Crew object of your automation, okay? In this case, just to be clear, I am working with the source directory and then my automation directory and then my crew.py file, which is the one that has a class with a method that actually returns my crew. Your project structure may look a little bit different, but just be sure that you have your crew accessible and that you can import it to your graphical user interface. Okay, great. So without any further ado, let's get right into building this. Okay, before actually starting to code this in Python, I just wanted to make sure that you understand what the current automation that I'm working with in this example is. This is not essential for you to understand, since in this video we're only going to be working in the front end of the application, but I figured that during the process of creating the front end, I probably make reference to some features of the application and of the automation, so I just wanted to make sure that you understand what the automation is supposed to be doing. So in very broad terms, the automation, what it does is that it takes the topic of a newsletter and then just a quick personal message, and it generates a newsletter. Okay, so this is an automation that has a team of research agents who are going to go to the internet and find the most relevant news in the past week about this given topic, okay? So in this example, for example, we have the USA stock market, and here we have just a quick personal message that is, dear readers, welcome to the newsletter. So by the end of the generation, I am going to get a HTML file with the latest news about the USA stock market and a personal message on top. Okay, so that is the automation that we're working with. And actually, if you're interested in building this automation yourself, I'm going to be uploading the video about building the automation in a couple of days or probably on Monday. Okay, so yeah, now that you understand what the automation is supposed to be doing, we're ready to start actually building the graphical user interface. All right, so the first thing that I want you to do is to install Streamlit, okay? And if you're using CrewAI, just by doing pip install CrewAI and then just importing the components, you can do pip install Streamlit like this. However, if what you did is you run CrewAI create and then you named your crew, then you're probably going to be using Poetry as your default package manager, okay? And that is what I did. So if that is the case, you're going to do Poetry, add Streamlit like that. And in my case, I actually already have it installed, so I won't be installing it again. But once you have done that, you're going to be able to go to your folder and you can create a new directory. You can call it GUI, or you can call it whatever you want, UI, front end, whatever. And then inside of it, you're going to just create your init.py file and then an app.py file where you're going to import Streamlit as st, okay? And now let's continue with the video. Perfect. So in order to build this graphical user interface, I'm actually going to be creating a class called newsletter gen UI. And it is this one that I'm going to be running to render my application, okay? And the first thing that I want to do is to define my main method, which is going to be my render method. I'm going to call self. And just to be clear, this is pretty much the same thing as if I was not using a class, but just to make everything easier and more organized, I'm going to be using a class. So here in the render method, which is the one that we are going to be calling to actually render to front end, I'm going to set my setPageConfig method from Streamlit to this. I'm going to call it newsletter generation. This is used to create the title of your page, and then let's set a page icon that in this case is just going to be an envelope, and there we go. And then let's add that st title newsletter generation, and then down here let's say that if name equals main, we're going to run the render method from this class right here. Okay, so let's save this and let's start running it to see how it looks like. And in order to run it, very simple, all we have to do is do Streamlit. Remember that you have to have your virtual environment activated on which you're working, and in order to run this, you do Streamlit run and then the location of your Streamlit application, which is, in my case, is seems to be a problem going on here. Apparently didn't find GUI, so maybe I have to call it from source, because I am right now, yeah, this should work. Now let's see, it seems to be starting a virtual server, so let's see what that created. And here we have it. Let me just open this on the side, and here we have our application that we're starting to build. So let's just close this, and I will continue building here, and you will see in real time how this is all changing, okay? Okay, so the first thing that we want to do is create our sidebar. So in order to do that, I am actually going to be creating another component right here. When I'm using Streamlit, I like to think of it as a React component with all your helper functions up here and then your render function on the bottom. I mean, this is not precisely how React works, but it just helps me get things a little bit more organized. So right here, let's create our sidebar component. And the sidebar component is going to have a title, got a lot of indentation of course, going to have a title called newsletter generator, and then just a short description of what this generator is. To generate a newsletter, enter a topic and a personal message. Your team of AI agents will generate the newsletter for you. So let's save this and let's click always rerun here to be sure that everything is rerunning correctly. All right, there we go. And now we can run this component right here. And there we go. But oh yeah, I forgot to say that this has to be inside a sidebar. So with st.sidebar, and there we go. There we go. So now this is inside a sidebar. I'm going to delete this title right here, not much use for it. And there we go. Then let's just add a text input and a text area for the user's topic and the personal message, okay? Because we want to get their inputs. So here's going to be, let me just zoom in a little bit. So here's going to be the topic and the personal message from the user that we're going to add to the top of the newsletter, okay? So the idea here is that our agents are going to take this topic and they are going to generate a newsletter of the most recent news related to that topic, and will display all of their thinking and conversation right here, and then in the end they will put the final HTML template for HTML file for our newsletter, okay? So now that the sidebar is finished, let's just add a button right here. st button generate newsletter. Let's save this, and there we go. There we go. So next thing to keep in mind right here is the environment variables, the session state variables that we're going to be dealing with, okay? Remember that in Streamlit, the session state variables are the variables or the information that you want to keep constant during the running cycle of your Streamlit application. In other words, remember that anytime you do anything like press a button or submit a text input or something like that, Streamlit actually reruns your entire code, which means that some of your variables are going to be redefined every time that you do something like that. In order to avoid losing information that you want to keep during your session, you want to create your session state variables for information that is going to remain constant anytime something happens during your application. And in this case, the session state variables that we're going to be working with are topic, newsletter, personal message, and a generating state, okay? So in order to initialize them in Streamlit, you have to do if topic not in session state, we're going to initialize st.sessionState.topic equals to an empty string. And what this is going to do is that when we initialize our application, it is going to initialize our state with an empty string, because remember that the state lives inside this property right here called st.sessionState. And if you remember correctly, when we created our text input elements right here, as you can see, the st text input topic actually has the key topic, which means that anything we store in this, let me just zoom a little bit more, anything we store in this text input right here is going to be stored in the session state variable for that particular key, okay? And the same thing for this text area right here. It has the key personal message, which will maintain the personal message key inside of our session state set to whatever we initialized right here. And so we have to do the same thing with that other one. So if personal message not in session state, we're going to have to initialize it with an empty string like that. And there are a couple more session state variables that you want to make sure that you have. In this case, we're going to be working with newsletter, which is just the final generation that we want. And of course, we want to keep it whatever happens during the runtime. And second thing that we want to create is the status of generating, because we want during the generating status, because we want that if the generating status or state is set to true, we want to be able to be running our automation with our agents right here. And once it is finished, we want to show the final newsletter. And in order to do that, you're going to do if generating as well, not in session state. You're going to set it to false. So there we go. Once that we have initialized all these session state variables, we can go right here to sidebar again. And remember that we had a button right here. However, this button is not doing anything just yet. But remember that if we want to do something when we press a button in Streamlit, there are several ways of doing this, but one of them is just saying if st button and then add our logic inside an if statement. This will run whatever you have inside of this if statement when the button is clicked. So if the button is clicked, we're going to set the generating state to true, and that will trigger our logic that will start generating our newsletter. Okay, so let's close this sidebar and actually write the logic for the generation of the newsletter. Great, so we have finished our sidebar, our session state logic. We now have to create the component that is going to live right here, which is going to have our agents talking to one another. Okay, so in order to do that, I am just going to create another component right here. I'm going to call it newsletter generation, like this. And right here, all that I am going to do is say that if st.sessionState is generating, which means that if we have clicked on the generate button, we are going to set, first of all, we're going to set st.sessionState.newsletter equal to another method that we have here, which is going to be self.generate newsletter, and this function is going to take the session topic, which in this case is going to be st session state topic, and it's also going to take the personal message like this. I'm just going to close this, and there we go. So this is going to execute this method right here, which we have not defined yet, so let's go ahead and define it up here. So we're going to say note like this. Define generate newsletter is going to take the topic and the personal message. And this method right here is basically just going to call the crew that we have defined in the previous part of this tutorial. If you're watching this video as just the front end, you can think of this as the method that is going to call your API that will return the generation of your crew. And this API will of course have to return a thread of the entire thought chain of all of your agents. Okay, so yeah, here if you were in a more production ready environment, you would be calling an API right here that would contain your automation from your crew. In this case, since we have it all in the same folder, in the same project, and it is a pretty small project overall, all we're going to want to be doing here is just import from newslettergen.crew. We're going to be importing our newsletterGenCrew class, which is basically this one right here, from which you can run the crew method, which actually just executes your entire automation. Okay, and remember that this one right here, let me just show you real quick. This one right here takes a few input parameters, which are the topic, the personal message, and the HTML template. Okay, so let's get that right here. The HTML template, I'm going to copy this one from here. Just going to say that my HTML template is going to come like here. This one's going to be self method like this. And we have already imported our class. Now what we can do is just initialize our crew, saying that our crew will equal our already initialized automation with crew. We're going to, let's just define our inputs that I had right here already. Just going to paste them. So my inputs are basically going to be, this time not an input from the terminal, which was how we would usually do things if we were working directly in the command line, but we will be running this directly from the topic that is going to be passed as an argument to this method, and the personal message as well. Of course, it is going to be coming from the argument right here. And this one is going to come from our method right here. Just let me verify that the path to the newsletter file is actually correct. So newsletter template.html, in source, newsletter gen, config, and newsletter template.html. Everything seems to be working correctly. So things seem to be in order. This one is going to import our HTML template, which if you don't remember or have not watched that part of the video, is basically just a HTML file with the template that our agents are going to fill. Here we have the title of the day, the personal message for our newsletter, and then for each one of the stories we have a title, the summary, why it is important, and the sources. Okay. Alright, so now our newsletter seems to be okay. And right here, what we're going to want to do is let's just call that method. Okay. And let's just return crew. Remember that in order to run a crew, you have to run it with kickoff. And here we're going to pass in the parameter of inputs, which is going to be the inputs that we defined right here. So I'm going to click save, and actually if we run this, it should already work. However, it will not yet log all of the thinking from our agents right here. It will just say that it's going to start thinking, and then by the end, it is going to print the results. Actually, before doing the thinking, let's just print the results, okay? So let's say that once we have this generation, this thing right here, the newsletter generation right here, it is going to be generating my newsletter, and after it is generated, I want to show it. So right here, let's add another part right here to our newsletter generation component. After it has been generated, we're going to say that if st session state newsletter, and let's just test the second thing right here, and st session state dot newsletter is different than an empty string, because remember that when we first initialize this session state variable, it is going to be an empty string. The next thing that we want to do is that with a container, with an st container, which is Streamlit component that allows you to just contain a little bit of other components. And right here, we are going to just show a preview of our newsletter, okay? So in order to do this, I have actually already prepared some code right here. So to make it easier for you, I'm just going to paste it and explain it to you real quick, okay? Of course, we love the indentations. Okay, so let me explain this to you. Let's see. Here, just to be clear that everything is under control and we haven't lost the track of what's going on, let me explain this to you again. So here is our newsletter generation component, which is being called from the render method right here. We're actually going to call it right here. Let me see. Self.newsletter generation, like that. Okay. And this component, what it is going to do, it is going to load after the sidebar. Let me just show you just real quick, without all of this clutter, where this component is. So I'm going to do st, the title. I am the generating component. I'm going to save this, and you can see that this one is right here, okay? So the generating component is on the main part of the application outside of the sidebar, okay? Now let's uncomment all of this. And what is going on is that right here, inside the main component of the application, if the generating session state variable is set to true, we're going to generate the newsletter given the topic and the personal message that we got from the form in the sidebar. Okay, so that is for getting the generation. And then secondly, once the generation is complete, so remember that once the generation is complete, it's going to be stored here in the newsletter. And this automation actually generates just a string of HTML code. So the idea right here is that if this session state.newsletter variable exists, and if it is different to an empty string, which means that if it has been changed from its initial value, because remember that down here we initialized it with an empty string, what we're going to do is we're going to create a container where we're going to show it. So in other words, we're going to display the HTML code inside of this variable in a small rectangle right here, okay? But only once the generation has been finished. And in order to do that, we run a Streamlit container. We write newsletter generated successfully, and then we create a download button, which will actually allow the user to download the HTML file that was generated. But remember that our ST session state newsletter is only a string. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a download button, which is just a regular component from Streamlit, which allows you to download a file from a string. And in this case, the download button is going to say the label of our download button is going to be download the HTML file. The data is going to be, of course, the newsletter that was generated. And the file name is going to be just, let's call it newsletter.html. And then just going to mention that the format of our file is HTML. To show you real quick how this is actually working, I'm just going to do this without the generation. So I'm going to comment out the generation, and I am going to set my newsletter variable right here to a simple hello world. So I'm going to do div I'm going to say hello world. There, we close this. Okay, so we save this, and now we have that the session state newsletter has been saved, and it is this. Here we have a problem. Components has no attribute B1. So apparently we have a problem right here. Let's see. Alright, so apparently since I coded this part right here, maybe Streamlit has updated their code. So I'm just going to remove this preview for now, and I'm just going to show you how the download button works. So in the download button, as you can see, we have the download HTML file label. We have the data, which comes from this variable right here, which for now is just a dummy variable. And the file name, we have it right here. So I'm going to click on download. And as you can see, we have it right here. And you can see that it is the downloaded file that I had created right here, which just says hello world. Okay, let's close this and let's return this to how it was, so that our newsletter variable actually contains the generation of the newsletter. So there we go. The preview, we're going to deal with this a little bit later. I'm not sure what's going on right here. I'll clear that in a moment. Alright, so hello back from the future. I actually just wanted to correct a quick little mistake that we made while we were coding this right here. You might have noticed it if you were paying attention. Here in the function that we are calling to generate our newsletter, we are initializing our crew. We are creating our inputs, and then we are returning crew.kickoff. However, this thing right here, newsletter gen crew, which is the instance of the class that we're initializing right here, it actually does not have a method kickoff. The one that has a method kickoff is the instance of crew. And this one right here actually has a method. Let me show you. So this one right here is the one that we coded before. This one has a method called crew. And it is actually the method called crew, the one which actually returns the crew that will have the kickoff method. So what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to do crew.crew. And from here, we're gonna call the kickoff method. Now this just becomes a little bit too ugly. So what I'm going to do is, instead of initializing all of this up here, I'm just going to initialize it down here like that. And it looks much more clean and neat. Okay, so now it should work, and we can continue developing our step-by-step callback for the application. Okay, so let's do that and then test it in the front end. Alright, and something that I wanted to make sure that we do by the end of the process is to make sure that we stop the process that is generating the newsletter. Okay, so if you remember correctly, here in our render method we have the sidebar, and inside the sidebar we have this button that generates the newsletter. Okay, and what this button does is that it sets the generating session state variable to true. because remember that by default, that session state variable is set to false. And when this session state variable is set to true, the component of the newsletter generation is going to start generating our newsletter, right, with this part of the logic right here. However, there is something to keep in mind, that once this is done, that means that once session state.newsletter has a value that is different to an empty string, we're going to show a success message, and then we're going to show a button that allows us to download the HTML file with the final generation of our newsletter. And actually, after that, we have to pause the generation, because otherwise it is going to continue trying to generate newsletter over newsletter over newsletter. So the idea right here is that after this session state variable has a value, we can set this session state generating back to false. And that is what we're going to do right now. So let's do st.sessionState generating equals to false. There we go. So now we can save this, and now this is going to work correctly, and we can start testing our application. All right, so now not only is our automation working correctly, but also we have built a graphical user interface for our clients, colleagues, or team to use. Okay. Now the thing is that the graphical user interface currently only has a quick sidebar. It has some inputs, a button to generate the newsletter that we're going to be generating with this application. And then by the end, on the right side, or the main part of the application, we're supposed to get the final version of the newsletter that is going to be generated by this crew. The thing about that is that it would be great to see the thought process of our agents within the application itself. And that is actually not very hard to do. So what I'm going to do right now is to show you how to create the step callback that will be called every time our agent has a thought, every time each one of our agent either uses a tool or tries to talk to a colleague, and log that not only in the terminal, but also in the front end of our application. Okay. Before doing that, I just wanted to make sure that everything right here in the front end is pretty well understood, and that we are all on the same page. So just to be clear, right here we have the front end that is built with Streamlit. Whenever we run this file, we're going to be executing the render method from this newsletter gen UI class. And this render method basically just sets the title for our application with its icon, initializes 4 session state variables, then renders a sidebar. Let me just show you a sidebar real quick. The sidebar just includes a title and just a quick text right here, description of the application. Then we have 2 different inputs. The first one is the topic, and the second one is just a personal message that we will be adding to the top of our newsletter. And for this one right here, we have the key, which is going to be the topic of the application, and this key is going to be stored in the session state. Okay, so just to be clear, every time you have a text input or a text area with a key, whatever value you enter to this input is going to be stored as a session state variable with this key right here. So we have the topic key right here, which is going to populate this session state variable, and this one right here in the text area with the personal message has the key personal message, which will populate this variable right here. Okay, and then once we have both of our inputs, we're going to be able to click the button, and the button is going to change the session state variable generating to true, because remember that by default it is set to false. Okay, and that is the sidebar. So once you have completely added your inputs and clicked on generate, it is going to set the generate to true, and that is what's actually going to happen when to trigger this method right here. I mean, the newsletter generation component is already rendered right here. And what this component does is that if the session state variable generating is set to true, it will run the generate newsletter method, which is defined up here. And this method takes the topic and the personal message, and all it does is basically runs the automation from CrewAI. Okay? As you can see, this method just imports the automation newsletter gen crew that we had previously created in right here. There you go. And it runs the crew method, which basically just renders the application. And it just passes a few inputs. It takes the topic, as we mentioned right here, the personal message, which we're passing right here, and the HTML template, which is the HTML template that we had previously created. Okay? And that one, of course, we're loading it right here on top with another method, which just opens the newsletter template.html file that we had stored up here, reads it, and returns it as a string. Okay, so there we go. That is what is happening behind the scenes. But remember that we want a step callback to actually show what is going on in the head of our agents. Okay, so what is their thought process, so that we can also see what might be some errors that they might be making. Okay. So let's go to Crew right here, and actually adding a step callback is very, very simple. All you have to do is that for the agents that you want to log the step callback, you're going to go right here, right where we're adding the parameters for your agent. We're going to add an extra parameter, which is going to be step callback, like this. And what this is going to do is that whichever function that you pass right here is going to be executed every time your agent thinks about something, okay? And something that is great about this is that you can pass in the agent output every single time and use it within your callback. So in order to do that, we're going to be using a lambda function, and we're going to call it step. And right here we're going to call another function that we haven't yet created. It's going to be called step callback. It's just a method that we're going to add to this class in just a moment, and we're going to pass in the step. And secondly, we're also going to pass in a second parameter, which is going to be the name of this agent. And in order to do that, this one is the research agent, like this. There we go. So now all we have to do is create our callback function right here, or callback method. Just going to paste it because I had actually already created it before, and I am going to explain that to you how it works. Okay, so as you see right here, we have a few errors, and the only problem with, the reason for these errors is that we're using some typing and some libraries that we have not yet added. The first one that we're going to add is Streamlit, because we're going to be logging the thought process into Streamlit to actually show it in the front end of our application. So in order to do that, we're going to import Streamlit as st. Secondly, we're going to import from typing union, list, tuple, and dictionary. And last but not least, we're going to import from LangChain core, which is the library that contains all of the abstractions for our agents and all of the LangChain core components. Remember that we are using CrewAI, and CrewAI is built on top of LangChain. So by adding this is going to work correctly. And right here, we're going to just tap into from LangChain core agents. We're going to import this class called agent finish. Okay, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about how this one works in a moment, but for now, let me just explain to you what's going on right here with this step callback function. Now, something that I wanted to mention is that this callback function is actually just a modified version of another method that was published in another tutorial by Sam Whittiven, who is also a YouTuber here, and he has wonderful tutorials about AI. I'll leave a link in the description to his channel. His videos are amazing. You're certainly going to learn a lot about his videos. Alright, so let me just explain to you this modified version of the function. The idea here is that whatever we have in the callback, we're going to be logging it inside an st.chat message, okay? And st.chat message is just a Streamlit component that shows a chat message on the front end. And this is very useful for chatbots. If you're familiar with the channel, we have used this component before to create interactive chatbots or ChatGPT clones, and it works pretty good. And I figured that for this thought process of the agents, this might be a good component to implement. Now, the first thing that we do is we test whether or not the output that we're getting is in JSON format. I actually forgot to import JSON right here. So let's do that. And now, so here we have that we're testing that if it's in JSON format, and if it is, it just takes the contents of that JSON and puts it inside the agent output variable, okay? And then next thing we do is we test if it is a list, and if it is a list, we're just going to take it and extract the information from it. So we're going to be extracting the action and the description, okay? And once we have those pieces of information, we're just going to write them within the chat message. So here, as you can see, we have stWrite. We're writing the agent name. In this case, this piece of information is actually coming from our parameters right here. And next, we're going to stWrite the tool that the agent chose to use. And for that, we're getting the attribute from the information that we got inside the agent output. And after that, are going to add we're going to log the input that our agent is going to be adding to that tool. So just to give you an example of what might be happening here, for example, let's say that our agent chooses to use the search and contents tool, which searches the internet based on a query and returns the search results from Exa and returns the contents from that given website from Exa as well. So right here, what would happen is that the tool used will log search and contents, and the tool input right here would log whatever query our agent chose to look on the internet. So if the agent was looking for news about AI or news about the USA stock market, here you would see tool input, then you would see a JSON object saying search query, latest news about the US stock market, for example. Okay, and then right here we have the lastly we have whatever the actual agent thought, which is within the action object right here. And this is what you would see when the agent is formulating its thought, okay? So right here you would see something like, okay, so I need to find information about the latest news on the USA stock market. So I am going to use the tool named Search and Contents to find information about this. And then right here inside of Expander, we're going to add the observation. To be clear, what is happening right here is, an ST expander is just a HTML expander, just like a Streamlit component that allows you to click an arrow to expand the content that is inside of it. And you have like a show observation tag. And inside of it, we have the observation. Now, the observation is whatever the agent found after performing the action. So in this case, if its action was to choose a tool and the action was then to search the internet, the observation would be the search results. Now, I chose to put this inside of Expander because usually the observations are very long, especially if you have a research agent. So for example, if your research agent is looking for the latest news about AI, then the observation is going to be 10 or 15 search results about AI and all of them with their contents. So that's why I put it inside of an expander. I'm going to show you in a moment how that looks in the actual front end, but just to be sure that you're understanding what is going on right here. And then last but not least, here we have if the agent output is an instance of agent finish. That is why I had to import agent finish right here. We're going to do this. And agent finish is basically just a class from LangChain that the agent returns, of which the agent returns an instance of, once it has finished its thought process, okay? Because remember that an agent goes into some sort of a loop, a thinking loop, where it calls the language model, gets a thought, performs an action, then calls the language model again, then gets a thought, performs an action, etc., until it finds the answer to the task that you gave it. And the idea right here is that if it has finished the task, it will return an instance of agent finish. And this says that we are going to be passing to the next task within our process. And I am testing here for agent finish precisely because we want to know when the agent finishes its task, and I am writing a different message in that case, in which the agent is going to be like coming up to us and saying, hey, I finished my task, here's the output. And then it's just going to tell you what it finished. Then of course just handling some unexpected formats. And that is the step callback. It works pretty good. I have actually tested it quite a few times before. And how about we actually just test it right now? So let's do that. Oh, and something that I forgot to mention before is that right here we have added the step callback to the first agent, but we haven't done that to all of our agents. So I'm just going to copy this right here, go back right here, going to paste it right here. And this time, of course, the second parameter that we're going to be passing in, remember that it is the agent name. In this case, it is not the research agent, but it is the chief editor. And for the last one, it is going to be the designer. So I'm just going to paste this right here, and this one is going to be the designer or HTML writer, let's call it. So we're going to save this, and now we are going to execute this automation, not from here, but from our front end, and we should see the messages display on our front end with all of our thoughts of our agents, and at the same time, by the end, we should see a download button with the results of the entire automation, okay? So let's check that. Wonderful, it's been a few hours of hard work. Now let's get to see the rewards of all this hard work and generate a newsletter using our team of AI research agents who will communicate with each other and give us a complete newsletter with the latest news that they have researched on the internet by the end of a few minutes, okay? So let's choose whatever topic we want right here. We're going to generate a newsletter about the USA stock market, and let's just add a personal message here to add a personal touch of this automated process. Let's say something like, hello everyone, this is a newsletter generated completely by AI research agents, so enjoy. And this message is going to appear at the top of our newsletter. So now let's click on generate newsletter, sit back and see our agents collaborate with each other and communicate with each other, okay? Let's do that. Okay, so we have the first one. We have the first thought. The first thought comes from the research agent. We can see that he used the search and contents tool, and what he thought in order to get here was to find the latest and most relevant news about the USA stock market, I should start with a broad search query using the search and queries tool. And the query that he searched for was search news, latest news on the USA stock market. And if we click right here on show observation, we're going to see the results that our agent got. So in this case, the first story that it got, the Dow extends its week-long winning streak, etc. And here we have all of the news stories that our agent was able to find, and that will be useful for him to create this newsletter. Okay, let's see what he does next. And the second thing that we have right here, the second thought, is an exception. And this is a very educational example because we can see that the agent can make mistakes and correct itself, okay? So here you can see that it made a mistake while calling one of the tools, and it is able to correct its mistake and find a solution so that by the end we have a result that we want. So here you can see that the observation is, I did it wrong, I passed in the invalid format, I can now give a great answer, blah, blah. Okay, so that, it seems to have decided that it had all the relevant information after this mistake. And we can see right here that the agent said, I have finished my task, and here's the story 1, the story 2, the story 4, 5, 6, 7, and up to 10 stories. Now it is the turn of our chief editor, and our chief editor also used the search and contents tool, and his thought was, to accomplish this task I will need to carefully review each news article, rewrite the titles and make them more engaging, etc. Check the URL, so you can see how they are interacting with each other as though it was a team. Okay, and the chief editor also found an exception. We can see the observation of the results that he got in the previous task. Right here we have the exception. He's like, okay, there was a mistake. I'm gonna give the final answer right now. And here you can see the chief editor finally finished his task. He gave us a title and a summary for each one of our stories. He chose the most relevant stories. In this case, he chose 4 of them. And now we have that the final agent, who is the HTML writer, has successfully created our HTML newsletter that we're going to be able to send to our subscribers. And there is probably a better way to show this than just a few printed text on the screen like this. So what we're going to do is download the HTML file and let's take a look at it. Okay, just gonna make it a little bit shorter like this. There we go. So now we can see the results of our automation. We have a title that was generated by AI, of course, and it is a special title for this week's newsletter. Then we have the title for each one of the stories, which was also rewritten by our chief editor. The summary probably comes directly from the researcher, or maybe the editor modified it a little bit. And here is just a quick paragraph outlining why this article is relevant for our readers. Then we have the source. Let's see that the source actually works. So that seems to be working correctly. This other one seems to be working correctly too. This one too. So everything seems to be working okay. Amazing. There we go. So congratulations, we have successfully finished our newsletter automation. And now we can create our newsletter for our subscribers in a few minutes. So good job. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and like the video, and of course share it with other people if you like it. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.